My wife left on a Tuesday, suitcase wheels screeching like a banshee as she dragged them across our porch. I stood frozen, watching her taillights vanish into the Ohio dusk, leaving me and her 16-year-old son, Ethan, behind. By Wednesday, Ethan was the only one still calling me dad. The house felt hollow without her, like a body missing its heartbeat. Ethan and I stumbled through the silence, our grief a shared language we didn't yet know how to speak. He was lanky, all elbows and quiet eyes, with a mop of dark curls that reminded me of his mother, Claire. But where Claire's eyes had grown cold, Ethan's held a warmth that kept me anchored. We were two castaways, clinging to the wreckage of a family. Springfield, Ohio, wasn't kind to broken homes. Our small town buzzed with whispers. Neighbors who'd once brought casseroles now stared as if divorce was contagious. I was 42, a high school history teacher with a mortgage and a heart full of cracks. Ethan, though, was my lifeline. He'd sit at the kitchen table, sketching comic book heroes while I graded papers, his pencil scratching a quiet rhythm. "You okay, Dad?" he'd ask, voice soft but steady, and I'd nod, even when I wasn't. He wasn't my blood, but he was my son. Claire had brought him into our marriage when he was 8, a shy kid who'd called me Mr. Tom for a year before Dad slipped out. I'd never pushed him to say it, but when he did, it felt like a gift. After Claire left, I worried he'd follow her, but he stayed. He chose me. That first month, we built a routine. I cooked terrible pancakes. He burned toast. We laughed through the smoke, and I thought maybe we'd be okay. But Ethan was hiding something. I saw it in the way he'd flinch at his phone, the way he'd linger in the school parking lot, scanning the crowd like he was waiting for a ghost. One night, I found him on the porch, staring at the stars. "You ever feel like you're not who people think you are?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to say yes, to tell him I was drowning in who I'd become, a failed husband, a makeshift father, but I just sat beside him. "You're enough, Ethan," I said. He didn't reply, but his shoulder brushed mine, and that was enough for me. School was harder. Ethan was a junior, navigating a world of jocks and cliques. I'd catch glimpses of him in the halls, always alone, his backpack slung low. Kids whispered when he passed, and I overheard the word fag more than once. My fists clenched, but Ethan would just shrug it off. "It's nothing, Dad," he'd say, but his eyes told a different story. Then came the fight. I was in my classroom, grading essays, when the principal called. Ethan had punched a kid named Ryan, a linebacker with a smirk I'd never trusted. By the time I got to the office, Ethan's lip was split, and Ryan was nursing a black eye. He called me a freak, Ethan muttered, staring at the floor. Ryan's parents were there, demanding suspension. I wanted to scream that Ethan was protecting himself, but I held my tongue. The principal gave him a week's detention, and I drove him home in silence. At home, Ethan finally spoke. "Ryan saw me with someone," he said, his voice shaking. "At the arcade. He said stuff about us." I waited, heart pounding, for him to say more. "Who's us?" I asked gently. He looked away, his hands twisting in his lap. "Just a friend," he said, but the word carried weight, like a secret too heavy to hold. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's words echoed, and I wondered who this friend was. I'd seen him with a boy from art class, Lucas, a quiet kid with paint-stained fingers and a shy smile. They'd been close lately, always sketching together in the library. I didn't push Ethan to explain, but I started watching closer. The way Lucas looked at him, the way Ethan's face softened at it wasn't just friendship. It was something more. Something Ethan wasn't ready to name. Claire called the next week. Her voice sharp through the phone. "Is he okay?" she asked, like she hadn't abandoned us. I wanted to yell, to tell her she'd lost the right to ask. But I just said, "He's fine." She didn't mention coming back, and I didn't ask. Ethan overheard and didn't say a word, but he stuck closer to me after that, like he was afraid I'd leave too. By spring, Ethan was 17, and the tension in him was palpable. He'd come home late, his eyes red, his excuses vague. I didn't pry, but I worried. Springfield wasn't a place where boys like Ethan could be themselves. Not safely. I'd seen the news kids beaten for who they loved, families torn apart. I wanted to protect him, but I didn't know how to start the conversation. One evening, I found a crumpled note in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. It was from Lucas. "Meet me at the lake. 8 p.m. I need to tell you something." My stomach twisted. Was this why Ethan was so guarded? Was he scared? I left the note where I found it, but I couldn't shake the image of him sneaking out, meeting Lucas under the stars, carrying a secret I wasn't part of. The next day, I tried to talk to him. "Ethan, you know you can tell me anything, right?" I said over breakfast. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth, then nodded. "Yeah, Dad," he said, but his eyes were distant. I wanted to push, to ask about Lucas, about the note, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I'm proud of you." He smiled, small and fleeting, and it broke my heart. That night, he didn't come home until midnight. I was waiting on the porch, the air thick with summer heat. He looked startled to see me, his hair mussed, his shirt untucked. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, then said, "With Lucas. We were just talking." But his voice cracked, and I knew there was more. I didn't push. I just nodded and let him go inside. But the weight of his secret settled heavy on my chest. The summer stretched long and restless, the Ohio heat pressing against our little house like a held breath. Ethan and I were still navigating our new normal, but his late nights with Lucas were becoming a pattern. I'd hear the screen door creak past midnight, his sneakers soft on the stairs, and I'd lie awake, torn between trust and fear. Ethan was changing. He'd always been quiet, but now there was a defiance in him, a spark that both thrilled and terrified me. He'd blast music I didn't recognize, songs about love and rebellion, and I'd catch him smiling at his phone, thumbs flying over texts. I wanted to ask about Lucas, but every time I tried, he'd shut down, his eyes darting away like a cornered animal. One afternoon, I found him in the garage, rummaging through old boxes, looking for something. I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He jumped, clutching a faded photo of him and Claire at the county fair, his 8-year-old grin wide and unguarded. "Just memories," he said, tucking the photo into his pocket. I didn't press, but the ache in his voice mirrored my own. We were both mourning her, even if we didn't say it. School started again, and Ethan was a senior now. He and Lucas were inseparable, always huddled together in the art room or sharing earbuds at lunch. I watched from my classroom window, torn between pride and worry. Springfield High wasn't a haven for kids like them. The same kids who tormented Ethan last year were still there, their taunts sharper now, laced with venom. I overheard Ryan and his friends snickering in the hall, tossing around slurs like grenades. I reported it, but the principal just sighed. "Boys will be boys," he said, and I wanted to punch the wall. One evening, Ethan came home with a bruised cheek. "Tripped," he muttered, but his eyes were glassy, and he wouldn't meet mine. I sat him down, handed him an ice pack, and said, "Talk to me, Ethan. Please." He shook his head, but after a long silence, he whispered, "They hate me, Dad. They hate who I am." My heart stopped. I wanted to ask who they were, what he meant by who I am, but I just pulled him into a hug. He didn't cry, but he clung to me, and I felt the weight of his fear. The next day, I confronted Ryan's parents at a PTA meeting. They brushed me off, saying Ethan was confused and needed guidance. I saw red, but I kept my voice calm. "He's my son," I said, "and he's perfect." They didn't respond, but the look in their eyes said enough judgment. Pity. Disgust. I drove home shaking, wondering how I'd keep Ethan safe in a town that seemed to want him broken. That night, Ethan opened up. Just a crack. We were on the porch again, the crickets loud in the dark. "Lucas kissed me," he said suddenly, his voice barely audible. "At the lake." And I kissed him back. He looked at me, waiting for judgment, but all I felt was relief. He was trusting me. "Okay," I said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head, but his shoulders relaxed, and I knew we'd crossed a threshold. Over the next few weeks, Ethan started talking more. He told me about Lucas, how they'd met in art class, how Lucas made him feel seen. "He gets me, Dad," he said one night, his voice full of wonder. "Like, really gets me." I smiled, but inside, I was terrified. I'd read about hate crimes, about kids like Ethan and Lucas who paid a price for love. I wanted to lock him away, keep him safe, but I knew I couldn't. All I could do was listen. Claire called again, her voice softer this time. She wanted to see Ethan, said she missed him. I told her he was busy with school, which wasn't a lie, but I didn't tell her about Lucas. That was Ethan's story to share, not mine. When I told him about the call, he just shrugged. "She doesn't get to miss me now," he said, and the hardness in his voice broke my heart. I wondered if I'd failed him by letting her leave, by not fighting harder to keep us whole. By October, Ethan and Lucas were officially together, though they kept it quiet. I'd see them holding hands in the backyard, their laughter soft and private. I wanted to be happy for him, but the fear never left. One night, I overheard a voicemail on Ethan's phone, Ryan's voice, slurred and angry, promising to teach him a lesson. I confronted Ethan, but he begged me not to get involved. "It'll make it worse," he said, his eyes pleading. I backed off, but I started keeping my car keys by the door, just in case. Halloween came, and Ethan dressed as a comic book hero he'd drawn himself, all sharp lines and bright colors. Lucas came over, dressed as the hero's sidekick, and they grinned like kids again. I took a photo, their arms slung around each other, and for a moment, I forgot the world outside our door. But that night, as they left for a party, I saw Ryan and his friends across the street, watching. My gut twisted, but Ethan waved me off. "We'll be fine, Dad," he said, and I let him go, praying I wasn't making a mistake. They came home late, unharmed but shaken. Ethan didn't say much, just hugged me before going to bed. I stayed up, watching the street, the voicemail replaying in my head. Something was coming, and I didn't know how to stop it. November brought a chill to Springfield, the kind that seeped into your bones and stayed. Ethan and Lucas were more cautious now, sticking to quiet corners of the school, avoiding Ryan and his crew. But the tension was a living thing, coiled tight in our house. I'd catch Ethan checking the locks at night, his face drawn, and I hated how fear was stealing his light. I started volunteering as a chaperone at school events, telling myself it was to stay involved. But really, I was watching Ryan. He was a predator circling, his smirk sharper, his friends louder. I reported every slur I heard, but the school's response was tepid warnings, never consequences. Ethan begged me to stop. "You're making me a target," he said, and the guilt cut deep. I was his father, but I felt powerless. One Saturday, Ethan and Lucas came to me with a plan. They wanted to start an art club, a safe space for kids who didn't fit in. We'd talk about comics, identity, stuff like that. Ethan explained, his eyes bright with hope. Lucas nodded, his quiet confidence steadying Ethan's nerves. I was proud, but terrified. A club like that in Springfield. It was a beacon for trouble. Still, I said yes, helped them draft a proposal, and got it approved by the principal, who seemed more annoyed than supportive. The club's first meeting was small 5 kids, including Ethan and Lucas, sketching in a classroom after school. I stayed late, grading papers nearby, listening to their laughter. It felt like a victory, fragile but real. But the next day, someone spray-painted fags across the art room door. Ethan's face crumpled when he saw it, and Lucas put an arm around him, whispering something I couldn't hear. I reported it, demanded action, but the school called it vandalism and moved on. I wanted to scream, but Ethan just cleaned the paint off himself, his jaw tight. That night, he broke. We were eating pizza, the TV humming in the background, when he slammed his plate down. "Why do they hate me, Dad?" he shouted, tears streaming. "I'm not hurting anyone." I pulled him into my arms, his sobs shaking us both. "You're enough," I said, over and over. But I wasn't sure he believed me. I wasn't sure I believed myself. Lucas started coming over more, his presence a quiet balm. They'd draw together on the porch, their sketches full of heroes who looked like them brave, unapologetic. I'd watch from the kitchen, my heart swelling and breaking. They were so young, so in love, and the world was so cruel. I wanted to shield them, but I knew I couldn't. Not forever. Claire showed up unannounced in December, her car idling in the driveway like she wasn't sure she'd stay. Ethan froze when he saw her, his sketchbook falling to the floor. "I want to talk," she said, her voice brittle. I let her in, but I stayed close, watching Ethan's face. She apologized, said she'd been lost, but her words felt hollow. Ethan listened, silent, then said, "You left us. You don't get to come back and act like it's fine." She cried, but he didn't. When she left, he hugged me, and I felt the weight of his choice. Hay was still mine. The art club grew, despite the hate. Kids started showing up, sharing stories of their own struggles. Ethan and Lucas were leaders, their bond inspiring others. But Ryan and his friends didn't stop. I found a threatening note in Ethan's locker. "You and your boyfriend are done." I showed it to the principal, who promised to investigate. But I didn't trust him. I started driving Ethan and Lucas everywhere, my eyes scanning every shadow. One night, Ethan came home late, his jacket torn. It was Ryan, he admitted, his voice low. He and his friends cornered us at the park. Lucas was okay, but Ethan's knuckles were bruised. I fought back, he said, and I saw a fire in him I hadn't seen before. I was proud, but terrified. You can't do this alone, I told him. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already planning his next move. Christmas came, and we put up a tree, just the two of us. Lucas joined us, bringing homemade cookies from his mom. We laughed, sang off-key carols, and for a moment, it felt like we were untouchable. But later, Ethan pulled me aside. Dad, I need to tell you something, he said, his voice shaking. Lucas and I, we're not just dating. I love him. His eyes searched mine, waiting for rejection. I hugged him, my throat tight. I'm happy for you, I said, and I meant it, even as fear gnawed at me. That night, I found another note in Ethan's bag. This one worse, you're dead. Fag. My blood ran cold. I didn't tell Ethan, but I called Lucas's parents, and we agreed to keep the boys close. Springfield was a tinderbox, and I didn't know how much longer we could keep the flames at bay. Winter tightened its grip on Springfield, the snow muffling the town's edges, but not its cruelty. Ethan and Lucas were braver now, holding hands at school when they thought no one was watching. But I saw the toll it took. Ethan's smiles were rarer, his sketches darker heroes fighting monsters that looked too real. I started attending every art club meeting, sitting in the back like a sentinel. The kids didn't mind. They'd even started calling me Mr. Dad, a nickname that made Ethan roll his eyes but smile. The club was their sanctuary, but outside its walls, Ryan and his friends were relentless. I'd find slash tires on my car, hateful notes taped to our mailbox. I reported everything, but the police called it pranks, and the school did nothing. I felt like I was failing Ethan, failing Lucas, failing the family I'd promised to protect. One night in January, Ethan came home shaking, his coat dusted with snow. They followed us, he said, his voice raw. Ryan and his guys. They threw bottles at us. Lucas was with him, his lip bleeding, but his eyes were fierce. We're not scared, Lucas said. But Ethan's silence told a different story. I cleaned them up, made hot chocolate, and sat them down. You don't have to be heroes, I said. Just be safe. Ethan looked at me, his eyes wet. I just want to be me. Dad. I called the school board, demanded action. They promised a meeting, but I didn't trust them. I started researching, looking for ways to protect Ethan legally, emotionally. I found a local LGBTQ support group and convinced Ethan and Lucas to attend. They were hesitant, but the group welcomed them. And for the first time, Ethan talked about his fear, his love, his dreams. I sat in the back, listening, my heart swelling with pride and breaking with worry. Claire called again, saying she wanted to visit for Ethan's 18th birthday in February. I told her it was his choice, and when I asked him, he said no. She doesn't know me anymore, he said, and I didn't push. But I saw the pain in his eyes, the wound she'd left. I threw myself into planning his birthday pizza, comic books, a new sketchpad. Lucas helped, baking a lopsided cake that made Ethan laugh harder than I'd seen in months. The night before his birthday, we got a call from the police. Someone had smashed the art room windows, spray-painted slurs across the walls. Ethan's sketches were torn, scattered like confetti. He didn't cry when we got there, just started cleaning. his hands shaking. Lucas stayed by his side, and I joined them, scrubbing hate off the walls until dawn. "We'll rebuild," I said, and Ethan nodded, but his eyes were hollow. The school board meeting was a farce. Ryan's parents were there, claiming their son was provoked. I lost it, shouting that Ethan and Lucas were the victims, not the problem. The board promised measures, but nothing changed. I started looking into transferring Ethan to a school in Columbus, somewhere safer, but he refused. "This is my home," he said. "I'm not running." In March, things escalated. Ethan and Lucas were jumped after an art club meeting. 3 against 2. Ethan fought back, his knuckles bloody. But Lucas took the worst of a broken rib. A concussion. I found them in the hospital. Ethan holding Lucas's hand, his face a mask of guilt. "This is my fault," he whispered. I wanted to tell him it wasn't, but the word stuck. Instead, I sat with them, my presence the only thing I could offer. Lucas's parents were supportive but scared. We agreed to press charges, but the police were slow, saying there wasn't enough evidence. Ryan walked free, his smirk intact. I started driving the boys everywhere, my car a fortress. Ethan was quieter now, his defiance replaced by a heavy silence. I'd catch him staring out the window, his sketchbook untouched. One night, he came to me, his voice small. "Dad, what if I'm not strong enough for this?" I pulled him close, my heart breaking. "You're stronger than you know," I said. "And I'm here. Always." He nodded, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. I started sleeping with my phone on, ready for the worst. Spring came, and with it, a flicker of hope. The art club organized a community exhibit, showcasing the kids' work. Ethan and Lucas poured themselves into it, their sketches a testament to their resilience. The night of the exhibit, the room was packed. Parents, teachers, even some kids who'd never spoken to Ethan before. His art vibrant, raw heroes fighting impossible odds stole the show. I saw him smile, really smile, for the first time in months. But as we left, I saw Ryan in the parking lot, his friends behind him. My blood ran cold. I grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him and Lucas to the car. "Stay close," I said, my voice tight. They nodded, but Ethan's eyes were locked on Ryan, a mix of fear and defiance. I drove away, my hands shaking, knowing we weren't safe yet. The art exhibit's success lingered like a fragile dream, but Springfield's shadows were never far behind. Ethan and Lucas threw themselves into their art, sketching heroes who defied the world's cruelty. But I saw the strain in their eyes. They were 18 now, on the cusp of adulthood, but the town's hatred made them feel like fugitives. I started meeting with a lawyer, quietly, exploring restraining orders against Ryan and his friends. The process was slow. The evidence thin notes, voicemails, witnesses who wouldn't talk. Ethan didn't know. I didn't want to burden him, but I was running out of ways to keep him safe. Every creak of the porch, every strange car on our street, set my nerves on edge. One April evening, Ethan and Lucas came to me with a plan. They wanted to leave Springfield after graduation, move to Columbus, where they could be themselves. "There's a community there," Lucas said, his voice steady. "Art schools, support groups." Ethan nodded, his eyes bright but scared. "We'd be okay there, Dad. Together." I wanted to say yes, to pack their bags myself, but the thought of him leaving gutted me. He'd been my anchor as much as I'd been his. I gave them my blessing, but I made them promise to wait until summer. Finish school strong, I said. Then we'll figure it out. They agreed. But I saw the impatience in Ethan's eyes, the need to escape. I started saving money, researching apartments in Columbus, telling myself it was for him, not because I was losing him. Claire showed up again in May, unannounced, her eyes tired but determined. I want to make things right, she said. Ethan was at school, and I didn't let her in. You can't just walk back in, I told her. He's built a life without you. She cried, but I didn't budge. When Ethan got home, I told him, and he just nodded. Good, he said, and went to his room. I wondered if I'd done the right thing, keeping her at arm's length. But Ethan's trust was worth more than her tears. Graduation was weeks away, and the art club planned a final project a mural on the school's back wall, approved after months of fighting the board. Ethan and Lucas designed it, a vibrant scene of heroes rising from ashes, a testament to survival. The day they started painting, I stood watch, my eyes on Ryan and his friends across the field. They didn't approach, but their presence was a threat, silent and heavy. That night, Ethan came home late, his paint-splattered clothes torn. It was Ryan, he said, his voice flat. He trashed the mural. I drove to the school, Ethan beside me, and saw the damage slurs scrawled over their work. Paint cans smashed. Ethan didn't cry, just started cleaning, his jaw set. I called the police, but they took hours to show. And by then, Ethan and Lucas had already started repainting. I joined them, my hands shaking with rage and pride. The mural was finished a week later, more beautiful than before. The school board, shamed by community support, finally suspended Ryan. But it felt like too little. Too late. Ethan and Lucas were hailed as heroes online, their story shared by local activists. But the attention brought new threats, anonymous calls, rocks through our windows. I installed a security system, my savings dwindling. But Ethan's safety was worth it. One night, Ethan sat me down. Dad, I need to tell you something, he said, his voice steady but heavy. Lucas and I, we're getting married. Not now, but someday. We've talked about it. My throat closed up. I saw the boy who'd called me Mr. Tom. Now a man planning a future I couldn't protect. I'm so proud of you, I said, pulling him into a hug. But inside, I was terrified what would Springfield do to them. June came, and graduation was a blur of pride and fear. Ethan walked across the stage, his cap decorated with a tiny pride flag. Lucas cheering from the stands. I clapped until my hands hurt, but my eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for trouble. That night, we celebrated at home, pizza, music, Lucas's family joining us. Ethan laughed, his arm around Lucas. And for a moment, I believed we'd made it. But the next night, everything changed. Ethan and Lucas went to the lake, their old meeting spot, to celebrate. I stayed up, waiting, my phone on. At 2 a.m., Ethan called, his voice panicked. Dad, they're here. Ryan and his friends. They've got us cornered. My heart stopped. I grabbed my keys, called the police, and sped to the lake, praying I wasn't too late. I found them in the parking lot, Ryan and 3 others circling Ethan and Lucas. Ethan was shielding Lucas, his fists raised, blood on his face. I shouted, charging forward, and Ryan's friends scattered. But Ryan stood his ground, a knife glinting in his hand. Stay out of this, old man, he snarled. I didn't think. Just tackled him, the knife skidding across the pavement. Ethan and Lucas ran to me, and we held each other as the police finally arrived. Ryan was arrested. His friends rounded up. Ethan and Lucas were shaken but unharmed, their arms around each other. I drove them home, my hands trembling, the weight of the night sinking in. We were safe. But for how long? The police station was a blur of fluorescent lights and paperwork. Ethan and Lucas sat close, their hands clasped, while I gave my statement. Ryan was charged with assault and possession of a weapon, his friends facing lesser charges. It wasn't enough. Nothing could undo the fear in Ethan's eyes, but it was a start. We drove home at dawn, the Ohio sky bruised purple, and I held Ethan's hand like he was 8 again. The weeks after were quiet. Too quiet. Ethan and Lucas stayed close to home, their laughter muted. The mural stood untouched, a symbol of their resilience. But Springfield felt like a minefield. I pushed for the move to Columbus. And this time, Ethan didn't argue. We need a fresh start, he said, and Lucas nodded, his hand squeezing Ethan's. I sold the house, the place where Ethan had called me dad for the first time. It hurt, but it was necessary. We found a small apartment in Columbus, close to an art school where Ethan and Lucas enrolled. I took a teaching job nearby, trading Springfield's judgment for a city's indifference. It wasn't perfect, but it was safer. Claire reached out one last time, begging to see Ethan. He met her at a coffee shop, Lucas by his side. I waited outside, watching through the window. She cried. He listened, but when he walked out, his face was calm. She's not my family anymore, he told me. You are. I hugged him, my heart full and breaking. The first night in Columbus, Ethan and Lucas cooked dinner-burned pasta, but we laughed anyway. They talked about their future, about art, about marriage. I listened, my chest tight with pride. They were stronger than I'd ever been, braver than the world deserved. But the night Ethan said Dad, or Daddy, came unexpectedly. It was late, the apartment quiet, just the two of us on the balcony. He was sketching, his pencil pausing as he looked at me. Dad, or Daddy, he said, his voice teasing but soft, a question wrapped in a joke. I froze, caught off guard, then saw the love in his eyes, not just a son's, but a young man's, testing the bond we'd built. Dad, I said, ruffling his hair. Always Dad. He laughed, and the moment passed, but it lingered, a reminder of how far we'd come. Ethan and Lucas thrived in Columbus. The art school loved their work, and they found a community that embraced them. I watched from the sidelines, my role shifting from protector to supporter. They didn't need me to fight their battles anymore, but they still called me for advice, for dinners, for the occasional burned pancake. Ryan's trial came and went, a guilty plea sparing us the courtroom. He got community service, a slap on the wrist, but Ethan didn't care. He doesn't get to define me, he said, and I believed him. The hate hadn't won, not in Springfield, not anywhere. Years later, I stood at their wedding, Ethan in a sharp suit, Lucas beaming beside him. They'd painted their own invitations, heroes intertwined with flowers. I gave a speech, my voice cracking as I called Ethan my son, my hero. The room cheered, and I saw Claire in the back, invited at Ethan's insistence. She smiled, tears in her eyes, but I didn't need her approval. Ethan was mine, and I was his. We'd faced the worst hate, fear, Lawson come out stronger. Ethan never left me. Not when Claire did. Not when the world tried to break him. And I never left him. Not through the nights of doubt or the fights we couldn't avoid. That night on the balcony, when he called me Dad or Daddy, it wasn't just a joke. It was a promise of family forged not by blood, but by choice, by love, by standing together when the world said we shouldn't. As I watched them dance, their hands clasped, I knew we'd won. Not just against Ryan, or Springfield, or even Claire's absence. We'd won because Ethan was free to love, to create, to be himself. And I was free to be his dad. Always.